Hello and welcome to True Audio Files. Today in this episode, going to talk about Court and Spark, Joanie Mitchell album. Biggest reason for that is the fact that Mofi has just come out with the one-step version of it. It just came in my mail this week, and we're going to see how it compares to some other options that I have, or at least one option that I have here. I've had some reservations about this, mainly because my past experiences with some one-steps, the last few that have come out, have had some sibilance, so that's given me a little bit of a concern, and hope that that trend does not continue with this one. So we'll see about that. I want to also kind of give you a little bit of an insight as to how I go about doing these shootouts for those of you who don't normally watch my videos, and that is I basically listen to the new reissue that's just come out all the way through, mainly for a couple of different reasons. One would be just to kind of see what it sounds like overall, and then also try to pick out a song or two that I can do A-B comparisons to back and forth between the different versions that I have. So I will be comparing the one step that I have here with a Nautilus Half Speed that I purchased a few years back, and this is cut from the analog master tapes, Half Speed Mastered. The one step, again, here it is basically cut from a digital transfer that Mofi has done for this one. And I have number 310. Not sure how much that matters to anybody, but I think it's cool that I get a low number. There's only going to be, it looks like 5,000 of these that are going to be printed up. So that's kind of that. So basically what I had decided on was I was going to do Car on a Hill as my demo, mainly because it had some great saxophone effects, kind of panning left and right, and there was some other, a lot of stuff going on in the recording, and but I'll explain why I ended up doing that one, but going to a different ones, and I ended up going with Court and Spark and Help Me as my choices instead of Car on a Hill. So let me talk a little bit more about the Mofi one step. Put it on. I right away it floored me. There was a very, very wide soundstage, a soundstage that went beyond the speakers. Great bass, decent amount of treble. For those people who don't like a lot of treble, maybe a little too much treble for some, but I like it. I'm a big bass and treble guy, so I didn't have a problem with it. And I just thought overall I had a great clarity, good 3D separation of the instruments and the voices in the recording, and a quiet pressing, a relatively quiet pressing. I will say overall that as far as super vinyl pressings go and one steps go, this one certainly is not going to be the quietest one I have, but it's certainly not terrible either. But you know, if I have to make a gripe about this, the biggest gripe I would have would be that there's a little bit of noise on this, but it's not terrible. So I come to doing, going through and deciding on Car on a Hill, and I play it. And one of the things that I have had a vague recollection of when I played it all the way through the first time was there was some weird distortion going on in the right channel, and I can't remember now if it was vocals or instruments that were causing the distortion. But it didn't sound like sibilance. It definitely sounded like maybe the mics were too hot or something to that effect. But that concerned me because, you know, is this going to be a situation where the one step was having this issue, or is this, you know, something that's in the recording? So, but definitely heard it clear as day when I listened to it the second time around. And then I put on the Nautilus to try to listen to it. And I did hear it on the Nautilus as well. It sounded a little bit different than it did on the one step, but it was still there. So that kind of, I had a little bit of relief knowing that it wasn't the one step that was causing this issue, this distortion. It was just in the recording and something I just never really picked up on before for some weird reason. Maybe because it was just a little bit more obvious on the one step. I don't know. But anyway, so now that I knew that, I decided let's go with something that didn't have that distortion in it. And I decided to go with Court and Spark and Help Me instead. So I originally thought, well, maybe just do Court and Spark. But I listened to it all the way through, and the one thing that I noticed on Court and Spark is there isn't a whole lot of bass drum in it, so that was part of the reason why I went also with Help Me as well. But anyway, the one thing that stuck out to me is, the Nautilus still sounds really good. It's got a decent amount of bass, decent amount of treble, probably a little bit more upper mid-range than the Mofi has, and not as much high end and low end as the Mofi, but still pretty good there. But the one thing I did notice that was a noticeable difference when listening to the two is the Mofi definitely had the better separation of instruments. Like on Court and Spark, there was definitely a situation where there's an acoustic guitar, I think there's a hi-hat, and the vocals kind of all centered in the middle of the recording, and you can separate them a little bit better in the on the Mofi, where it's not as obvious on the Nautilus. And just all along the sound stage was kind of the same way. There's just seemed to be better separation between them. And there's also more sound stage, or a wider sound stage, where actually on Court and Spark, there's an acoustic guitar that plays, and it actually has a feeling like it's almost like right next to you instead of just kind of off to the right. Where on the Nautilus, it's definitely kind of more sounds like it's off to the right. But definitely the one step goes beyond the speakers much more so than the Nautilus does. So, and the Nautilus was a little noisier, but I got it used. It's not like I bought it new, but it looks clean. But it definitely was a little bit noisier than my Super Vinyl was. So, but both have been cleaned with an ultrasonic cleaner, and I think I may have used my VPI vacuum cleaner for the Nautilus, but regardless, they've both been well cleaned, put in new inner sleeves. So kind of both have been well cleaned and cared for. So I know that it's not because they're dirty. So I mean, that's what it boils down to. If you're not a big treble fan, you may prefer the Nautilus. If you're not a big bass and treble guy, I should say, or person. I personally am. And I think it's most noticeable on tracks like Help Me. That one, I really definitely, felt the deep bass drum more so than I did, on the one step, I should say, than I did on the Nautilus. So, but in my opinion, there's definitely a clear advantage on the one step, personal preferences wise, definitely with the sound stage, definitely with the separation of the instruments and the vocals, and I prefer the EQ on the one step. So now the question becomes, the Nautilus probably is in the $25 to $30-ish range out there if you can find a good clean copy. So is the one step going to be worth the maybe 4 or 5 times more money than the Nautilus? I guess it all depends on how big of a fan you are of this album. If you're a really big fan of it, I would definitely say yes. You want to get the best sounding copy. I'd be curious to know if anyone else knows a copy that sounds better than the Nautilus. But in my opinion, the one step definitely sounds better than the Nautilus in my personal preferences on every level. It checks all the boxes for me. Quieter pressing, better sound stage, prefer the EQ, just a lot of different things. So, if you're wanting the best of the best, go with the one step. So that's my review. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Do you guys have another version that you prefer? I do have an early pressing of it as well, but I felt that the Nautilus sounded better, so I went and stuck with that. But I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are in terms of what you feel the best sounding version is of Court and Spark. So that's everything I have for this episode. Stay tuned. Probably sometime also later in the week, this week, probably not too much later in the week, I'm going to be going over my best of 2024 for the reissues of 2024. So stay tuned for that one. And I also have an update on my best of new releases for that on that episode as well, because I forgot some that I can't believe I forgot. But anyway, stay tuned for that. If you're seeing this around the time of the holidays, have a happy holidays. Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, whatever you celebrate. Hope they're happy and you have a good time during those holidays. So that's everything. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thanks a lot.